here's what you should have been taught about income tax at school. So firstly, income tax is a tax that you pay on your employment income. So you'll see it as like one of the 2 taxes you pay on your payslip. Pension income, even savings income. So it's important that you understand the key components of it. It's also a progressive tax. So it goes in bands, which we're going to talk about. And there are a few nuances between England, Wales, and Scotland. So stay tuned for those. Firstly, you have something called your personal allowance. So up to £12,570, you do not pay any income tax whatsoever. This is your personal allowance, or effectively 0% income tax on your income. And just a reminder, the tax year runs from the 6th of April to the 5th of April. So this 12,570 is within that tax year. Up next is your basic rate. So between 12,570 and 50,270, you pay 20%. This is your basic rate of tax. Following that is your higher rate. So between 50,270 and 125,140, you pay 40% tax. This is your higher rate of tax. And then finally, anything above 125,140 is taxed at 45%. This is your additional rate. So just to be clear, when it comes to income tax, it's done in bands. So for instance, if you earn £100,000, you wouldn't pay 40% on the entirety of 100,000. You would pay nothing up to 12,570. Then you pay 20% between 12,570 and 50,270. And then you would only pay 40% on the difference between 100,000 and 50,270. Now I want to go on to the 60% tax trap. So we have personal allowance, basic, higher, and additional. But there's also something called a 60% tax trap. And that never gets explained very well. So let's get into it. When you earn over £100,000, you will start to lose your personal allowance, that 12,570 we talked about before. So not only is your income above 100,000 being taxed at that 40% rate, you're also starting to lose this allowance. So what does this look like in practice? Well, for every £2 you earn over 100,000, you lose £1 of your 12,570 of personal allowance, giving you an effective 60%, because this 40 plus your income that was previously on 0% is now on 20%, giving you a 60% rate. Some argue that it could be 62%, because what we've not talked about on here, which I can do on the next video, is national insurance, which above this amount is 2%. This is also very much for England and Wales. If you are a Scottish resident, you will know that your income tax bands are slightly different, and your highest rate is in fact 48% and not 45%. If you want me to do an entirely different video on just Scottish income tax, again, let me know below. When it comes to income tax, there used to be this misconception that income tax specifically paid for certain things in the system, like it's specifically paid for the police service or specifically paid for government. However, tax nowadays just gets pulled into one and gets spread out into all the things it needs to pay for, like the NHS, state pension, the government, etc. So it's really important that we teach people how income tax actually works to reduce the fear, because often it's the miseducation and the lack of education that breeds so much fear into our financial understanding. I want to finish with some examples. So I'm going to give examples of someone on 33,000, someone on 64,000, and someone on 134,000 pounds a year, and how much tax they pay for each. Up first, for 33k, you would pay nothing on £12,570. And then you're paying basic rate, but only on the difference between 33,000 and 12,570. You're paying 20% on effectively 20,430, giving you £4,086 in income tax on a 33k annual salary. Secondly, is our person on 64,000. So again, they would get their £12,570 of personal allowance at 0%, meaning nothing. And then between 12,570 and 50,270, they would be paying that 20% rate. So they'd be paying 7,540 up to this point, and then between 64,000 and 50,270, they would be paying 40%, which equals 5,492. So in total, they would be paying £13,032 worth of income tax in the tax year. And finally is our 134,000. So this is where you have lost all your personal allowance. So you no longer get that 0%, 12,570. So between £0 and 50,270, you are being taxed at 20%. So that's £10,054. Between 125,140 and 50,270, you are paying tax at the higher rate of 40%, 29,948, and then 134,000 less the 125,140 is being taxed at 45%. £3,987. So you're paying £3,987, and then in total you're paying £43,989 in just income tax in the tax year on a £134,000 salary. So what we're seeing here with that 60% tax trap is it doesn't suddenly create an extra technical tax in the income tax threshold, but you are losing that personal allowance of 12,570 that you're originally getting for 0%, you're now being charged 20% at. So you have the 40 and the 20. Fun fact, the actual 60% tax trap was brought in by George Osborne. It was to make money when we privatized one of those certain, or publicized one of those certain banks. But now we've ended up privatizing that certain bank. And to be honest, I personally think that the tax should be reversed, or this tax trap. But I don't know. That's a conversation for another time. So if you want a more helpful guide with this, there is a salary calculator, and I'll put the link to it in the description below. But if you have any other questions, or you want me to go through another type of tax, just let me know.